everybody. I was on the call yesterday, and my name is Michelle Sarche. So I was introduced at that time, as well as our speakers for today's series on the American Indian Alaska Native Head Start Family and Child Experiences Survey, or AIAN FACES, as we refer to it. But I am joined by my colleagues, Dr. Jessica Barnes-Najor, who's at Michigan State University, and I'll be handing things over to her in just a minute, as well as Dr. Sarah Bernstein from Mathematica. So very similar to the data sets that you heard about yesterday from Drs. Swaim and Stanley, the AIAN FACES data are a national data set gathered in partnership with tribal Head Start programs in 21 to 22, what we call, or what are known as Region 11 Head Start programs. Region 11 programs are Head Start programs that are run by grants to federally recognized American Indian and Alaska Native tribes. Jessica and Sarah will be getting into this in our second presentation today, but until actually 2015, so one of the two data sets that are available for AIN FACES until 2015, Region 11, or again, tribally run Head Start programs, had never been included in any of the national studies on Head Start. And national studies of Head Start have been ongoing since about 1997. And so Region 11 Head Start programs were without the kinds of nationally representative data available to other regions of Head Start, data that are really critical for informing Office of Head Start, as well as individual grantee level decisions around Head Start policy and practice. And so we were really excited, those of us who have been doing research with tribal communities over many years, such as Dr. Barnes-Najor and myself. We were really excited when the opportunity came up with the FACES. That's the study, the Family and Child Experiences Survey, that's been ongoing in regions 1 through 10 since 1997. We're really excited with the FACES redesign in 2012 to have the opportunity to really sink our teeth into how to do FACES in the right way. And Drs. Swaim and Stanley talked about that yesterday, how to really do research in ways that honor tribal sovereignty, Indigenous ways of knowing and being, how to do that study in a good way in partnership with tribal communities. So we're really excited to share with you about that study. You're all here presumably because you hopefully have some interest in these data. Just like Dr. Swaim and Stanley said yesterday, we are really eager to have people apply for access to the data and to begin to analyze and share out on these data in ways that go beyond the analyses and the sharing out that's already happened. So anyway, we're just really excited to have you here. We're going to touch on some of the same things that you heard yesterday around partnering with tribal communities, but Dr. Barnes-Najor is really going to dig in a little deeper, as Dr. Stanley said yesterday, around some of the challenges and opportunities in partnering again with tribal communities. And even though our work was national in scope, it still represented a partnership. Our partnership looked a little bit different. And again, I think our second talk will get into how our partnership looked and how it might contrast with what you might know or have experienced in terms of community-based participatory research that maybe happens with one specific community. So again, this is on a national level. But anyway, so you may hear, for those of you who were here yesterday, you're going to hear some of the same themes emerge here. And invite also any of the other research teams who presented yesterday or tomorrow to also chime in here. I think this is an ongoing conversation, and it's so exciting to see the threads that we share and the ways that our studies also diverge. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jessica. And also one more thing, just please feel free to chat your questions, and we'll be monitoring the chat. We don't mind being interrupted and to let the conversation flow. So that's it.
Not at all. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for the introduction. And thank you for monitoring the chat. I do have it up. I should be able to see it, but you know, sometimes when you're presenting, it's hard to read that and really understand what's happening there. So, and we definitely want to interact with you, and for this to be more of a conversation. We have a lot of information we're trying to share this morning, and we also want to have some space for that conversation. We think it's really, really important. So thank you for being here this morning. I will say, for some reason this morning, I don't see the tiles, so I don't see your faces. So it feels really weird to me to not see your faces this morning, but I shall carry on. So, and Michelle can see your faces. So if you all come off video and want to try to talk, then she'll see that. So thanks for being with us this morning. We're really excited. You know, for a project like this, it's often hard to do a land acknowledgement statement because we're all in different places. This represents a really, really large team of people. The work I'm going to be presenting today does not represent just work that Michelle and I have worked on. This represents work of a really large team of people, from our community partners, those center directors and center staff who have been integral in helping us to really understand how to do this work in the good way, the right way, as well as providing feedback and guidance along every part of the process, both for this project and for many other projects that we have worked on through the Tribal Early Childhood Research Center. And so that's what this represents. It represents work of those of us who are researchers who've been doing this work, as Michelle mentioned, our community partners who have been working with us for many, many years, some since 2005 or 2006. And then our Mathematica partners who have also been really integral to developing this work. So there are slides in this deck that are that have been created mainly by Mathematica. There are slides in this deck that have been created by a group of community partners. I apologize, I have a 9-year-old, so you may hear some noise. So it's just a real co-creation is what this represents. And so this land acknowledgement is just the land acknowledgement for where I am, which is in Michigan, and I actually live in Hazlet, Michigan. This, however, is a view from Mission Point, which is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on Bay Mills Reservation, and it's overlooking the lake that they farm for wild rice. And then you can also see Lake Superior over there and even Canada. And this is a very sacred spot. And this photo was taken by one of our primary partners' daughter, Carly, who's a great photographer. And so we very much thank them for that. But I work for Michigan State University, and it's really important that I acknowledge that Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. The university resides on land that was ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize that settler and Indigenous signatories understood the terms and treaties in starkly different terms. According to the map within the university archive, Anishinaabe maintained an Indian encampment, in quotes, Indian encampment, south of the Red Cedar River when classes were first held at the university, which was then known as the Michigan Agricultural College, on May 13th of 1857. As one of the first land grant colleges, Michigan State University is a beneficiary of land allotted through the passing of the Morrill Act in 1862. The university finds pride in calling itself the nation's first pioneer land grant college, a term that is highly problematic, and we actually recommend that it no longer be used. For a long time, that idea, that notion of land grant was one that was made in terms of connection to the land and connection to practice and people, which is important. But we have to understand the history of this. The Morrill Act, which enabled the land grant system, was passed in the same year as both the Homestead Act, granting 160 acres to individual settlers who improved and farmed the land in the West, and the largest mass hanging in history in the United States, the state-sanctioned murder of 38 Dakota. I understand that there is an indelible relationship between the creation of land grant institutions, the simultaneous and ongoing expropriation of indigenous lands, and the governmentally coordinated genocide against indigenous peoples. By recognizing the ways that settler colonial institutions benefit from these interconnected histories, we work to hold the university accountable. I recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Michigan's 12 federally recognized Indian nations, Bay Mills Indian Community, Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, Hannahville Indian Community, Keweenaw Bay Indian Community, Lockview Desert Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians, Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, Little Traverse Bay Band of Ottawa Indians, the Potawatomi Indians, the Nottawasepi Huron Band of Potawatomi, the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, Grand River Bands of Ottawa Indians, Mackinac Band of Chippewa and Ottawa Indians, Swan Creek Black River Confederate Ojibwe tribes, across Turtle Island and throughout the Fourth World. I acknowledge the real ways that the state of Michigan, Michigan State University, and residents of this land have benefited from the forced and systematic removal of Anishinaabe and other indigenous peoples from Michigan, particularly during the Indian removal period of the 19th century. I affirm and acknowledge the Burt Lake Band, who were literally burned from their houses in 1900. I acknowledge the Métis community, who were forced from their community on Drummond, what is now considered Drummond Island, or called Drummond Island, when the border was drawn between the US and Canada. Likewise, I recognize that parts of what is now Michigan includes land within the traditional homelands of the Miami, Musqueam, the Sauk, the Kickapoo, Menominee, and other indigenous nations. So I just want to end this by saying that this land acknowledgement, that we as a group collectively understand that offering land acknowledgements or land recognitions do not absolve settler colonial privilege or diminish colonial structures of violence at either the individual or the institutional level. We recognize that land acknowledgements must be preceded and followed with ongoing and unwavering commitments to American Indian and Indigenous communities. And we hope that that is clear in our work today. So here's a little bit of history. So I'm going to do a little bit of history and then we'll dig down into the main kind of content of what we're trying to talk about. But we thought that history needed to come first. So federal policy led to both voluntary and forced relocation from familiar territories to the current reservation system. The reservation system was formed over the course of the 1800s. Some bands and tribes were forced by the US government to live together. Some of these groups were related and shared cultural traits, others did not, and may have even been historic enemies. A reservation is a land managed by a tribe, a legal designation for an area of land that is, again, managed by a tribal nation under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs. And federally recognized tribes are regarded as sovereign nations. They share a government-to-government relationship with the U.S. federal government. Tribal sovereignty is the inherent right of Native people to self-government, self-determination, and self-education. Sovereignty is a cornerstone of Native governments and is used as a platform to promote and maintain each tribal nation's economic, judicial, social, political, and cultural lifeways. It is important to understand and respect the sovereign authority of tribal leaders and the unique political status of their citizens while on tribal land. As sovereign nations, tribal governments hold elections, determine citizenship, and create and enforce laws. Tribes are not subservient to state laws. State laws cannot be applied where they interfere with the tribe's right to make its own laws that protect the health and welfare of its citizens, or where it would interfere with any federal interest. It is important to respect the sovereign authority of tribal leaders and the unique political status of their citizens while on tribal lands. Be aware of the place, space, and history that you occupy. Learn about the history and current context of the particular tribe that you are visiting or tribes that you're working with. Recognize the specific cultural practices and remember that what is true in one community might not be in another. Very few cultural traditions are universal across Native communities. Now, very often we understand that, American Indian or Alaska Native, or as we're talking about it here, AIAN, as a monolith or in generalities. To put this in perspective, the term European might reference heritage to one of approximately 50 countries, while the term American Indian might reference one of 560 tribal nations, each with their own distinct cultures and histories. It is also important to recognize the history of these categorizations. Today, American Indian and Alaska Natives may come from mixed ancestry. They are not categorized by certain skin tone, facial features, or religious affiliation. In this presentation, we will share some cultural features that may be common, but please note that even within these shared features, there are so many important distinctions across communities. I also want to describe what we mean when we say Alaska Native. Alaska Natives are distinct peoples and include many Native communities. Some Native Alaskan communities do not refer to their communities as tribes, but as villages. The Alaska Claims Settlement Act of 1971 provided the establishment of 13 Alaska Native regional corporations, which settled land and financial claims for lands and resources taken during colonization. Alaska Native do not have reservations, but do hold lands. So there's some very real implications of this history and culture. So from the historical perspective, including our own ignorance of history and societal norms, these both influence how researchers interact with people and their communities. Without at least a cursory understanding of this important historical context that surrounds AIAN relations with non-natives, researchers are likely to repeat damaging historical processes. It is important to remember that as we talk about history, we remember that it isn't a static history that remains in the past, but rather it is a living history that wields power and continues to impact tribal communities. By the middle of the 20th century, federal policy shifted toward the termination of tribes, reservations, and public services. Over 100 tribes were terminated. As a result, thousands of Native people were relocated to urban centers across America with the promise of job training and placement programs. The programs and laws associated with this period are largely accepted as yet another failed attempt to rapidly assimilate Native people into mainstream American society. Termination and relocation resulted in a deepening of poverty and disease on and off the reservation. However, an activist movement was born within urban American Indian communities that continues to thrive today. Despite popular conceptions of Native identity, there's no prototypical Native identity or pan-Indian. People often have a historical image of Native people, and there's a tendency to racialize Native people. We'll talk about this in a little bit. It is important to understand that Native identity exists on a spectrum. While some may be very traditional and engaged with their language and traditions, others may connect with their identity, their Native identity in other ways, or choose not to be engaged with cultural traditions. I see Maria put in the chat that there is one reservation in Alaska. Thanks for noting that. So there is a very negative history also regarding research, and it's important for us to understand this. There's a long history of deficit-based research. There are also many, many research abuses, and this all is kind of couched in the fact that American Indians and Alaska Natives are some of the most studied groups in American history. And so I am going to read one piece from the history of sterilization of Native women, because I think it's quite powerful, and then we'll switch over to viewing a short video at the New York Times on this. A study by the U.S. General Accounting Office in 1976 found that 4 of the 12 Indian Health Service regions sterilized 3,406 American Indian women without their permission between 1973 and 1976. And approximately 36 women under the age of 21 had been forcibly sterilized during this period, despite a court-ordered moratorium on sterilization of women younger than 21. 2 years earlier than the study, so 1974, an independent study by Dr. Connie Pinkerton-Urie found that 1 of 4 American women had been sterilized without her consent. Pinkerton-Urie's research indicated that the Indian Health Services had singled out full-blooded Indian women for sterilization procedures. Women often went in for things like appendectomies and left with incidental tubal ligations, no informed consent. All right, so now we're going to switch over to this. I will stop sharing and we will share this video. Thank you, Chelsea, for getting this started for us.
Sure, one moment.
Sure.
Sorry about this. Should have practiced this morning.
No, we talked about it.
Okay, I will be right back. It's making me leave the meeting and join back again. So please
no.
discuss for a second. I'll be right back.
Thanks. So we can take this time to take a quick moment while Chelsea hops off and hops back on so that we can watch this video. Do you have any questions or thoughts? Again, this will conclude the historical piece, and then we'll move into the rest of the session agenda. Hi, Jessica Saucedo. I see you. No, I'm not sharing my screen. I can see people.
I don't want to go too far into this, but Dr. Stanley and I were chatting about some of the similarities between our 2 studies and how we approached, you know, sort of the nationally representative aspects of our work. So just a heads up to, again, for those of you who were here yesterday, you're going to hear some parallels also in just sort of how we approach our work with tribal communities nationally.
I think those parallels are so exciting.
Yeah. And then just in terms of like reservations, I feel like yesterday's presentations really highlighted how things are evolving and shifting, especially around like tribal approvals, processes, and data sovereignty and stuff, but also in terms of, I think someone chatted, there's a reservation in Alaska, but I think there may be also some tribal statistical areas, quote unquote, in Oklahoma that may be moving to reservation status, just with some of the, you know, court decisions there about what's considered tribal lands in Oklahoma. So the number of tribes, reservations, that's all kind of, you know, evolving over time.
Yeah, sure is. Chelsea, if you can't get it to share, we could always just post that link and people can watch it on their own. It's not working.
Which one was this, Jessica?
This was the one by the New York Times about research injustices, more recent research injustices. But yeah, if it's problematic, we can always just,
Oh, okay.
she folks know. So I see things happening in Zoom, so hopefully it is working.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
When I tried to
I
share,
might be able to pull it up. Did
I
you do
think
it, Chelsea?
yeah, I have it ready. When I tried to share it, all my audio
Okay.
went. I didn't hear you talking. So are we ready for me to show the video?
We sure are. Thank you, Chelsea. I so appreciate it.
All right, I will do that.
Okay.
Getting there.
There
All
it
right.
is.
Here we go.
There are no cars in Supai, a village of 600 located on the floor of the Grand Canyon. It is only accessible by horse, helicopter, or on foot. Today, the helicopters land regularly with supplies or visitors, but for years the trails were the way of life for the Havasupai Indians.
We were hunters and farmers, but today we hardly use these trails because of the sickness that we have, and this sickness is called sugar diabetes.
So in the early 1990s, when researchers from Arizona State University came to Supai, offering to conduct diabetes research, many tribe members were eager to participate.
I gave my blood, you see, I gave my blood. They took my mom and my dad.
And I was 19 years old when they took my blood.
Blood has deep spiritual meaning to the Havasupai.
Many people obtained degrees, and what did we get? Nothing.
Carletta Toulouse was one of the very few members of her tribe to attend college. In 2003, while a student attending a dissertation reading, she was shocked to discover that her tribal blood samples had been the basis for studies beyond diabetes research.
All sorts of studies that were harmful to our reputation.
Researchers had looked at their blood for possible genetic markers for schizophrenia and had studied patterns of inbreeding. An anthropological study traced the tribe's ancestral migration from Asia, which contradicted their religious beliefs that they'd originated in the canyon.
A strange person whom I never saw before, taken a part of our bodies, and he finds out that we came from elsewhere. It hurts.
Blood vials sat in this freezer during a 7-year legal battle with the university until Tuesday, when the Arizona State Budget Committee approved a cash payment to the tribe in the return of any remaining blood.
We could do some kind of a big ceremony.
They deserve their blood back, and they deserve closure.
My heart cries because I know they're out there and I know they want to come home. My relatives, my friends.
It is an acknowledgement that could have broad implications for genetic researchers.
My main worry isn't that the research data will be used in ways that directly hurt the research subjects, but it will be used in ways that they don't agree with.
Hank Greeley is the director of the Center for Law and the Biosciences at Stanford University.
But it's not just the Havasupai. It's a situation with thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of us across the country.
Floranda Ukwala has held on to her ancestors' way of life.
I make baskets. I climb the rocks. I go down by the river and collect my sticks. See, this is too fresh. It's not the right time yet. Yes, I have diabetes. I have diabetes. My mom had diabetes, my dad had diabetes, my grandpa, my grandma on my dad's side, my great-grandma, my grandma on my mom's side. I wanted that cure. I wanted that Where, why so long?
While it is clear that some tribe members signed a consent form for a study of, quote, behavioral and medical disorders, they say they never understood that their blood would be used to study anything but diabetes.
I understand the scientist's perspective on this, and I share it to some extent. People are desperate to get more data, to get more samples. I think if we want people to give their samples to be used for a very wide range of projects, we should tell them up front. But we shouldn't say we're going to do it to study this disease, paren, and other things, close paren, and then use it for all the other things.
And we fought for many years to obtain the samples back to this village, back to the families, back to the deceased.
Because that's the way of our ancestry, that we honor and respect them no matter what. If it's not their body, it's their blood.
"20 years after they first gave blood, members of the Havasupai tribe have traveled 300 miles to retrieve it. The university is paying them $700,000 and returning their blood.
Thank you for sharing that, Chelsea. That's not easy to watch. That's hard to watch, right? And I want to acknowledge that. And it's important. So this is, it's important that we understand that and we acknowledge what has happened. And I think I'm sharing the wrong thing. It is hard to come up with that. So let's see here. I can share the right thing.